Well, hi, everybody. This is Heidi St. John coming to you live from the floor of the National Religious Broadcasters Association right here in Orlando, Florida. The interview I'm about to air was done with my friend Raymond Arroyo. Some of you guys might know him. He's a Fox News contributor, a New York Times bestselling author. And I'm speaking to him today about a brand new project that you are going to love. And it's part of his series that's going to be introducing young people to some of the heroes of the country. And so today we're going to be talking about Thomas Alva Edison. And the most important thing you're going to hear from Raymond today is the influence that his mother had on his life. This is going to be a great conversation. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. So you guys, I'm really thrilled to have New York Times best-selling author and Fox News contributor Raymond Arroyo on the show. He's got a brand new book in a series you guys are going to love. Welcome. I'm glad that you're here.
Heidi, I'm delighted to be with you, and particularly because this first book in the Turnabout Tales series, it really is about the guy I consider the patron saint of homeschooling.
Yes.
Thomas Alva Edison. But the real hero of this book, even on the cover, in the background there,
his mother.
Is his mother, Nancy.
Come on, it's his mother.
Yeah, who's been kind of forgotten in this story.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how I discovered this and then why I wanted to make this what I call a family read. Picture books, people crudely call them family reads in my world.
I love it.
I wanted everybody to have access to it, but I read one of these big Edison biographies, Heidi, and in the back, I always read the last chapter
Me
first.
too.
Yeah, well, I went to the last chapter. It's a good habit. You know why? You figure out is the juice worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
So in the back of it, there was an interview with Edison in his 80s, and he said, "My mother was the making of me. She allowed me to follow my bent, and at a particular time in my life, but for her love and devotion, I should never have become an inventor." And when I saw that, I said, who is this mama? What is the crisis point in his life? This is the story I need to tell.
I love it. You know, as a homeschool mom myself, I can tell you that my theme and the guiding principle for me in homeschooling my kids is to fold them where they're bent. So we have taken that approach with all 7 of our children. Some of them have gone into full-time ministry. Our daughter, Sierra, is a full-time graphic designer. We've got grandkids now. Wow. And my daughter, Savannah, is looking to see where is the bend that I can fold along in these kids, right? Because they come to us that way. And it sounds like this was the driving force behind the childhood and the eventual, uncovering of the genius of Thomas Alva Edison.
Well, his mother saw, and the book captures the curiosity, the rambunctious curiosity of this young boy. I mean, he wanted to figure out how honey was made, so he ripped open beehives. He wanted to find out how fire worked, so he lit a blaze in the barn, burned it down. Now, we're not suggesting the kids need to burn down the house.
Don't try this at home.
Yeah,
Literally, don't try that at home.
But the other things are important. His mother allowed him freedom to explore and ask all those questions.
Yes.
But very likely, Thomas Edison had ADHD. 6 million children in America are diagnosed with it. It's not a liability. It's a superpower. And I tell kids that all the time. In fact, a lot of children during school visits say, "Mr. Arroyo, did Thomas Alva Edison take medicine for his ADHD?" I said, "No, he didn't. He accommodated it, and he learned to use it." Yes. And the truth is, he was also probably deaf we know he was deaf by 12 years old and very likely had ADHD.
Profoundly deaf?
Oh, yeah, like couldn't hear.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I did not know
and
this.
That made him somewhat isolated by his own admission, isolated and withdrawn. But he said, the deafness probably drove me to reading. And I could deeply consider questions and focus on them with no distraction.
Wow.
Therein lies really the genius of Edison. And he said it himself. He said, I'm not a genius. He said, the genius is sticking to the problem.
Yes.
Don't give up. There's always one better way, he used to say. He found that as a very young boy. But the turning point tale, the centerpiece of this story is when he was 8 years old, Edison is enrolled in a local school, one-room schoolhouse. He goes through the lessons.
I wouldn't mind getting back to that.
Well,
that's homeschooling.
Except
one-room schoolhouse.
It was rote learning and memorization.
Okay, so it didn't fit him.
Didn't fit him. And he's daydreaming, he's looking around, he couldn't remember.
Frustrated.
The teacher picks him up one day and says, "You're addle-brained and can't be taught." He runs home crying to his mother. He's thrown out of school at 8 years old. Nancy Edison takes him to school the next day and says, to the schoolmaster, my son has more intelligence and curiosity than you'll ever have. I'm going to take him home and homeschool him.
Yes.
She's the hero of the piece.
Have you ever met Zan Tyler?
No.
You need to. I'm going to connect you. Zan Tyler, who was, I think, one of the homeschool heroes in the 80s. Same thing happened to her. She had a child with special needs in the public school. They basically said, you're too dumb to learn. So she said, fine, I'm going to homeschool him. And they said, fine, you homeschool your kid, we'll throw you in jail. So her answer to that, this is the 80s, Raymond. This was not that long ago, right?
Wow.
Her answer to that was to team up with our friend Mike Ferris and write the homeschool law that made homeschooling legal in the state of South Carolina.
I didn't know.
Yeah, amazing woman. And really, it just shows the determination of a mother who loves her child.
Yes, and Nancy Edison did something that later in life, Thomas Edison said, my mother taught me how to read deeply, quickly, and that training has stayed with me through my life because she taught me to learn with my head and learn with my hands. So he was a kinetic learner, and that tinkering was the heart of all of his invention. He tinkers, he plays, he refines, he perfects, he keeps pushing. He had, by the way, the light bulb. We take the light bulb for granted.
Yep.
Edison refined the light bulb. He didn't create it. There were arc lights, there were other versions of light bulbs. The problem is no one could figure out how to keep it aglow for any length of time.
And so he's tinkering
with his muckers, he called them in the lab. They went through 6,000 different filaments to try to conduct electricity until he came upon carbonized thread and later bamboo, which was the filament in the light bulb right up until the 1980s.
Oh, my goodness.
So Edison, the genius of the way we're communicating now, the microphone, the receiver that we on the telephone,
little one in my ear,
the motion picture camera, the curling iron, the tattoo pen, the alkaline battery, all of this is Thomas Alva Edison.
That is remarkable. You touched on something. I want to go back to it really quickly because you mentioned that Thomas Edison was a kinesthetic learner, and as a lot of people are learning, if you're new to homeschooling and you're trying to figure out how does my child learn, I remember because my son Skylar, who you met today, he was and is, I think, still a kinesthetic learner. And when I was growing up, and I'm sure this was the same for you, which were the kids that were always in the principal's office? Those were the ones, those are the kinesthetic learners. These were the ones who were messing with gum under the table or they couldn't sit still. And my friend said, Heidi, I think Skylar might be a kinesthetic learner. And I said, no, I don't believe in that. That's just a child who needs a little bit more discipline, more self-discipline, whatever. She said, no, I promise you, give him some Lincoln Logs or some Legos. And while the next time you're reading to him, let him play. And I'm telling you what, I took her advice. And the very next day I kept, homeschooling the kids like I always did, but I gave Skylar a bucket of Legos. And he never looked up at me a single time. And I thought, he's not listening. And at the end of the day, I said, Skylar, tell me about Thomas Jefferson, because we were studying Thomas Jefferson that day. And he knew the answers to the questions. He absolutely processed through movement.
Right.
And I think what a beautiful freedom that mothers have, particularly through homeschooling, to watch and see how does my child process information.
And only a mother or a father that close to the child will understand not only how do they learn best, but the possibilities of that child.
That's right.
Nancy Edison saw the possibilities. She fed him the classics, and I'm talking 8 years old, 9 years old.
They
Les
can handle
Miserables, the Dickens, and I've held them in my hand. The electric compendiums and scientific compendiums of the day. You can go to the Edison lab, and and they will pull these books for you. I've held in my hand the first sketch of the phonograph that Edison made. He learned by hand until he was an old man.
That's the kinesthetic learner in him.
3,000 notebooks.
Yeah.
3,000. So he would sketch things out, work the problems out, hand it off to the workmen. They would create these inventions, but they were his brainchild, created the same way he created when he was a boy in the living room of Nancy Edison.
This is phenomenal. This is the first in a series of books that you're writing called Turnabout Tales, which I am now a super fan of. All Raymond had to do was just give me the 2-minute scoop.
The pitch.
Yeah, and I was like, dude, I'm sold. What do you want me to do? I mean, I'm hired. Let's do the thing. So I love this because what you're doing is you're saying these kids had challenges and they face them and their pathway turn. And you see Nancy Edison helping her son navigate through these challenges.
And this is our calling as parents.
Yes. And
it's
then
what
history
we're here
changes.
for.
Yes.
And all of
100%.
history might hinge on your decisions and advocacy of that child.
Yes.
And, there was just a few weeks ago, somebody called my attention to this. Edison's piano is being auctioned off right now. Well, I pulled it up. I looked at it. On the clapboard that covers the keys, the far edge, the right-hand edge of the clapboard, it's all gnarled, like somebody scratched it or gnawed at it. It's all garbled at one end. Turns out Edison was deaf at that point, but he had a record label and the phonograph. He was recording music on the second floor of his lab. Hundreds of musicians recorded there, but he couldn't really hear. He would bite down on the clapboard so he could hear the music. It was like
The
a
vibration.
cochlear implant. Yes,
Wow.
the vibration in his skull. So the forward-looking genius of this man, by the way, he was very close to Henry Ford. He created the first electric car. Henry Ford said, you can't reproduce this. It's too expensive. The battery's too expensive. We can't do this.
We just saw a model of that car. I was speaking for the Washington Republican Party the other day at a giant car museum.
Oh, my God.
And my husband was like, Heidi, that's an electric car. I was like, no way. You do the history of this thing. It was amazing, the genius, these men who really existed before their time. And it sounds like Thomas Edison was
He
one of those men.
Still souls. Sometimes people who are not forward or gregarious or loud, those still waters run very deep, but they're profound and important for all of us.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the backdrop of the story. I learned so much about Edison. I thought I knew him because of the creations. I didn't really know him until I went on this journey. It's been really amazing.
Well, you've just told the story of every homeschool dad ever who's like, I didn't really understand history till I had to teach it in a
Right.
homeschool situation, or I didn't really
Exactly.
know until I went and wrote a children's book. This is beautifully illustrated,
Thank
very
you.
well written.
And Christina German, who's a German illustrator,
Incredible.
Christina herself, I found out later, is deaf. She's hearing impaired and
You're
can't
kidding.
hear. So she related in an interesting way to Edison, which, by the way, the deafness is just, I mentioned it in passing in the book, but it's not a centerpiece. But I love that it's part of a series. It's a way to introduce children to history and excite them about the foibles and the failings and the obstacles that they encounter in their own lives. I mean, I was thrown out of school in second grade, third grade. But I was thrown out. Why? Talking out of turn.
Yep.
And clowning around
Yes.
because I wasn't being challenged.
Yep.
And it took my parents to realize that and then accommodate the learning to the child,
Yes.
not the child to the learning. And
He's talking you guys into homeschooling. If you haven't started
Yeah.
homeschooling yet, Raymond here is going to be the new ambassador.
well, we have to catch up.
Yes.
I mean, I think so many children are slipping through the cracks because you have a system that
Allows it.
not only allows it, tries to squeeze children into these pre-made boxes.
Yeah.
No life, no soul is contained in a box that the government creates. I'm sorry. We have to be more flexible and movable and accommodate that child's
Yeah.
way of learning and path of learning.
It's
And
so interesting.
It's cool.
I would imagine you and I are in school around the same era. And I look back at my report cards from grade school and I got good grades, but my teachers are Heidi talks too much. Every single one of them, because they were handwritten back in the day,
Yes,
right?
yes, they
So
are.
I look at my report cards, every single one of them. Heidi's a great student, but she talks too much.
Won't
Always
shut up.
passing won't shut up. No one ever said, I wonder if you might be a teacher.
Right.
I wonder if you might go into media.
Right.
No one ever said that. Instead, it was sit down, be quiet, stop
No.
talking. And I wonder what would happen if we could take a generation of kids who are really being overlooked because they don't fit the status quo or they go outside of this prescribed box that we want them to fit into.
Heidi, I didn't blossom until really high school. And it was, earlier, but in high school, I went to an arts high school half the day and my parochial high school the other half of the day. Because of the challenge of that, I had no lunch. My lunch was commuting between the two schools.
man.
But it raises the bar. Suddenly you've got projects and performances
Yep,
needed here.
yep.
And you've got your schoolwork. And it readjusts your mind.
Yes.
And challenges you on a different level. That was really the making of me. So sometimes again, it was an unorthodox, odd way of learning, but my parents were willing to go down the path with me, and thank God for them. Thank
I
God for
love
the
it.
teachers and the people who allowed it.
Raymond, you have another book coming out right
do.
after this one. Tell us about it.
It is about the last youngest son of Abraham Lincoln, Tad Lincoln, and it's called The Magnificent Mischief of Tad Lincoln. And this book, Edison, is about how a mother, Nancy Edison, saves her son and sets him on his path. The Tad Lincoln story, without giving too much of it away, is really about a son saving the father in the midst of his darkest crisis. And together, they are really to blame for They are really to be credited for one of our great national holidays and a tradition that is exercised to this moment. I won't spoil it, but it's a really cool story. And the backdrop is a story of mercy and forgiveness and really love, and how family is the foundation and can be your defense and solid ground even when the world is falling apart.
Wow. Well,
it's an amazing story.
Raymond, I'm your new super fan, and I love this.
Heidi.
I love that the first book really focuses on a mother's love for her son and trying to figure out how to fold this kid along the bend that God gave him to her with.
Yeah.
And the next book's going to focus on a father's love for his son and the blessing of family. We need to change the narrative on faith and family here in the United States. This is a great way to do it. Raymond Arroyo, where can people find your book?
Oh, my goodness. You go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble. You can find it wherever books are sold. And HarperCollins, Zondervan is my publisher. Also, if you go on my social media, on my Twitter and my Facebook feeds at Raymond Arroyo, you will find links. I went to the Edison lab, and I shot inside the lab at different places. So if you've read the book, you can go and see his sketches, his office, how the final office of Edison, where he spent 40 years in West Orange, the final Edison lab, it looks like a 3-story library. This was his office, surrounded by books, with a table in the middle of the room where he would experiment and tinker and work. That's where he perfected the alkaline battery and the production of the light bulb in that facility. It is amazing.
That is amazing. So for all of you moms out there and dads who maybe have a kinesthetic learner on your hand, a child who doesn't learn in a prescriptive method, this is a story of encouragement and inspiration. And Raymond Arroyo, it's just been an absolute
Heidi,
joy to have you here. I'm your new super fan.
Oh, I'm your super fan. Thank you for what you do and for what you've done, most importantly, for your family.
Thank you so much.
It's critical. I mean, you see it in Skylar when he's nice to me. I see it. But it's the most important thing. The reason we're here is really to tend to these lives that are with us for a little bit and to set them on their course to be great citizens and great souls and great people. And you've done that. And that's what I hope, in a small way, I'm helping to encourage.
I love this. For those of you who are watching online, this is The Unexpected Light of Thomas Alva Edison. Run, don't walk, and get a copy of this book and read it out loud. You guys know me. I'm a super fan of bringing back Story Hour at home.
Yay.
This is a great place to start. Raymond Arroyo, thank you for joining
Heidi.
me.
What a pleasure.
Everybody else, thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you right back here again at the intersection of faith and